A forgotten farm girl with a secret strength no one could see. She would become one of America's greatest icons. This is her incredible true story. Our story begins in Gallia County, Ohio, along the muddy banks of Raccoon Creek in the fall of 1887. It's here that a feisty baby girl named Emma was born on a small farm where she was one of Hugh and Esther Caldwell's 15 children. Now, life in the Caldwell household was a strict regimen of hard work and discipline. Emma's father was a veteran who had fought for the Bluecoats in the bloody war between the states, where he lost a leg during his service. Hard times bred hard men. Then, after the war, Hugh came home, a man who had been changed forever. He was bitter, restless, and quick with the bottle. Most nights you'd find him at a gambling table, drowning himself in a sea of whiskey, only to get up the next day and do it all over again. And with a father like that, Emma and her 9 sisters and 5 brothers were the true workhorses of the family farm, tending to every aspect of the fields and the animals. Little Emma learned early on what it meant to pull her own weight. As soon as she was stout enough to heft a pail, she was out milking the cow, gathering eggs from ornery hens, hauling water from the creek, and working under the blistering hot sun in endless tobacco fields that were taller than she was. There was always work to be done, and because of this, Emma only saw the inside of a schoolhouse just a few months each year. The old-timers would shake their heads and say, "Well, what good is book learning for a gal anyway?" After all she was likely to do was grow up and have a passel of young'uns on her own. In their minds, money for schooling, that was better spent on boys who might amount to something, and not for those gals whose hands were needed in the fields and in the kitchen. So, like most other girls, Emma never went to school beyond the 8th grade and instead spent her entire childhood working like a full-grown man. The family lived in a small, hand-hewn log cabin that had just 2 main rooms downstairs and a low loft upstairs where all the children slept, 4 to a mattress, packed in like cordwood. It was a rough and drafty place, chinked with mud and moss that never quite seemed to stay put. And through those gaps between the logs, where the chinking had crumbled away, Emma would lie awake at night and gaze up at the stars glittering in the cold black sky. In those quiet moments, she dreamed of a world beyond those rocky fields, a life where maybe she wouldn't have to work until her hands bled, or to hear her father stumbling in drunk after another long night of cards and liquor. That's right, Emma was highly intelligent and full of dreams that reached far beyond that drafty little cabin. And in whatever scraps of free time she could steal, the young girl would slip away into the thick forest that surrounded the Caldwell farm. It was these thick hollers and ridges that became her real classroom, where she moved as quiet as the deer, watching the ways of the wild, learning which plants the rabbits favored and which ones animals avoided altogether, studying the tracks of bear and fox, and memorizing the songs of birds that told her when rain was coming or when spring would truly break through. And truth is, this mountain girl could read the forest like other girls read storybooks. Emma was an avid writer, too. she kept a small treasured journal that she guarded like gold, where she poured out her innermost thoughts and dreams. Many times as she sat listening to the sounds of nature, she scratched out poetry about those mountains and the wild things, as well as the quiet longings of a girl who wanted more than a lifetime of hard labor and a house full of babies. Well, by the time she was a teen, Emma was hired out for 75 cents a week to work as a maid to a family just across the state line in West Virginia. And by the winter of 1906, 18-year-old Emma had made her way back to southern Ohio, where she was also working as a housekeeper for an elderly widow in a small town situated on the Ohio River. And it was on a chilly night when she was walking home from a revival down at the Methodist church that a dashing stranger rode up beside her on his horse and offered to give her a ride home. The man's name was Perry Clayton Gatewood, a highly respected, aspiring politician in the area. Now, PC was from a well-to-do family who owned a furniture factory and was college-educated and a smooth talker. He had a stellar reputation as a teacher and a farmer. And from the very first time he laid eyes on Emma, he fell madly in love with her. And for the next several months, he did the best he could to swoon and charm his way into her affections. And by the summer of 1907, it had worked. The two lovebirds were spliced together as one, and Emma moved in with PC on his hillside farm overlooking Sugar Creek. From the outside, Emma's new husband was quite the catch. He was strong and well-built, with willowy eyes and an aristocratic southern charm that could turn any woman's head. He was a God-fearing church elder who didn't drink and was one of the only college-educated men in the entire county. Why, most women dreamed of raising a family with such a fine fella. It all seemed like a fairy tale. And within just a few short months, Emma was pregnant. A match made in heaven, right? Well, not so fast, my friend. Because, unfortunately for Emma, this is where the fairy tale romance ended. You see, no sooner than his new wife was with child, everything suddenly changed with her would-be Romeo. It was almost as if he shed his skin and revealed something dark that lived just below the surface. And it turns out that this perfect gentleman was actually a monster behind closed doors. And what happens next would change her life forever.
Give someone you love the gift of old-fashioned storytelling. 5 books for the young and old alike that will make your heart smile. Click the link below to order your copy of the Appalachian Storyteller today, also available on Amazon.
After just 2 months of marriage, the honeymoon was over, and it ended hard. PC dropped every bit of that sweet-talking charm and began treating his pregnant wife like a mule on the farm. He demanded that Emma work from sunup to sundown, out in the tobacco fields, suckering and topping plants under the blazing sun, hauling heavy loads of gravel for mixing concrete, mending fences, and keeping the house spotless from top to bottom. And no matter how hard she worked, it was never enough. Whenever the smallest detail wasn't exactly to his liking, whether it was a meal a few minutes late, a tool left out of place, or a floor that wasn't swept perfectly, he exploded in a blind, terrifying rage. The man who stood so tall in church was a demon behind closed doors, as he disciplined her with his bare fist so savagely that she couldn't even lay her head on a pillow at night. Bruises bloomed across her face and body like dark flowers. And all the while, her first child grew inside her. Emma wanted out, and she had dreams of running, but there was nowhere for her to go. She had no money, and her parents, they would see her as a failure if she moved back home with a baby on the way. So she was trapped in a nightmare with no way out. Thus a vicious cycle began. PC kept his wife pregnant, and the violence continued for decades as he moved up the political ranks and eventually became the 3-term mayor of Crown City, Ohio. In total, over the next 33 long, brutal years, Emma gave birth to 11 of his children. 11 times she carried a baby through fear and the beatings, and 11 times she brought a new life into this house of pain. PC was untouchable, even in 1924, when he was convicted of manslaughter for killing his neighbor during an argument. But he never spent a single day in jail for the crime. Many times Emma quietly begged for help, but neighbors, they just turned a blind eye. And so did the folks at church, who looked past all the bruises on her face. All the while, her husband shook hands at town meetings and carried himself like a man of importance. People in the small town simply didn't want to believe the rumors, or perhaps they were afraid to cross a man with influence. So the beatings continued. The final straw came in September of 1939, when PC beat her so severely that he broke her teeth and ribs, when finally Emma's 15-year-old son stepped in and pulled his father off of her, allowing Emma to escape out the back door. PC was so infuriated that he picked up an iron poker and raised it towards his son. But the boy had seen enough, and he told his father, "You best make that first swing a good one, because I promise you this, it's going to be the only one you get. You're never going to beat my mama again." With that, PC stormed out of the house and returned the next day with the police, when astonishingly, Emma was arrested and jailed in Milton, West Virginia. However, the mayor of this small town wasn't under the allure of PC, and he took one look at Emma, and he knew an abused wife when he saw one. So he released her from jail and even gave her a place to stay at his house. Emma filed for divorce, and the nightmare was over. For the next several years, she bounced around from job to job, working as a waitress, a maid, or caring for the elderly, as the last of her children finally moved away in 1951. It was a great time of healing for her. She continued to write poetry the same way she had done as a girl, and her love for taking long walks in the woods continued. Yet, she never wanted to be remembered as a survivor or a victim. And for all Emma had been through, it would be what happens next that would become the defining moment in her life, and resulting in her becoming the most unlikeliest of women to become a true American icon. You know, it's funny how destiny has a way of revealing itself in the smallest way. And for Emma, destiny would come calling in 1951. At 63 years old, with all her children grown and moved away, Emma happened to pick up a National Geographic magazine and read an article about the longest hiking trail in eastern America, something called the Appalachian Trail, stretching out at nearly 2,200 miles over the tallest peaks in the mighty Appalachian Mountains, a trail so rugged and primitive that only 30 men had ever completed the entire journey. And that's when Emma Gatewood decided to make history. Now, I need to pause here for just a moment. You see, the men who had completed this epic hiking marathon were skilled hikers in peak physical condition, carrying state-of-the-art survival gear. navigation devices, and weapons to protect themselves from the wild animals. They trained for years and had teams of people who knew about their journey and helped them along the way. Emma Gatewood, well, she had a pair of tennis shoes and a cloth bag slung over her shoulder that only contained an army blanket, a raincoat, and a shower curtain. And in July of 1954, without telling a single soul, Emma caught a Greyhound bus to northern Maine with the intention of hiking the entire trail all the way down to Georgia. But reading about a hike across America and actually doing it, well, they're two very different things, as she would soon find out. Because only after 30 miles, Emma had broken her glasses, run out of food, and became lost for days before she finally managed to make it to the second checkpoint, at which time the park rangers put the old woman back on a bus and sent her home back to Ohio. Now, most folks her age would have called that a sign from the good Lord to stay put and perhaps garden at home. But Emma Gatewood was not most folks, and that failure only lit a fire under her that nothing was going to put out. So in May of 1955, at 67 years young, Emma set out again, this time for good, carrying the same sack across her shoulder with some dried beef, cheese, and a few nuts. And once again, without telling anyone, she made her way to Georgia. This time she would travel north, and that trail was enough to break most men, and it wasn't kind to her either. But Emma was fearless. She came face to face with copperheads and rattlesnakes more times than she could count, and fought them off with her walking stick. On the coldest nights, with no shelter in sight, she'd heat up stones by the fire and sleep on them just to keep from freezing solid. One morning, she woke up to a curious mouse on her chest who was staring into her eyes, wondering what in the world was this old woman doing. She politely shared her breakfast with her new friend and then traveled on. When she ran out of food, she ate wild berries and nuts. Occasionally, she'd meet another person on the trail who wouldn't spare her as much as a drink of water. And other times, people were generous, including one stranger who sent Emma on her way with a sack of fresh fried chicken. Weeks and then months went by, and Emma continued on, averaging 15 miles a day. And as she traveled north, folks who had passed this 150-pound elderly woman began telling others about the little old lady who had completed over 1,000 miles of the trail nonstop. And soon, newspapers picked up Emma's story. Sports Illustrated ran a feature on her, calling her America's grandma. And suddenly, people all across the nation were cheering Granny on. But of all the trouble that trail threw at her, nothing tested her quite like what happened up in Vermont when a hurricane blew in from out of nowhere and trapped Emma inside a tiny lean-to with 8 teenage black boys from East Harlem, New York, who were there on a church trip. For 4 straight days, the storm raged something fierce, and there they sat, a 67-year-old woman from Appalachia and 8 inner-city boys huddled around the same fire. And when those flood waters finally rose up around the lean-to, those boys carried Emma, piggyback, right across the swollen creeks, with her arms wrapped tight around their necks. Heck, after living with a man like P.C. Gatewood, Emma wasn't afraid of anything. 147 days later, on a cool morning, 67-year-old Emma Gatewood stood atop Mount Katahdin in Maine alone. And as she looked out at the majestic view, tears ran down her face as she spontaneously started singing America the Beautiful. Astonishingly, she had done it. Emma Gatewood was the first woman in history to hike the entire 2,150-mile Appalachian Trail alone. And suddenly, she was the most beloved woman in America. But she wasn't done. That's right. In 1959, she set her sights on the Oregon Trail, a daunting 2,170 miles. And now at 69 years old, she started walking in Missouri, averaging 22 miles a day. And 3 months later, she was welcomed by thousands of cheering fans when she crossed the finish line in Portland, Oregon.
Hey guys, JD here, and we are in the Cherokee National Forest in the Iron Mountains on the Appalachian Trail. Truly one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth. The range straddles Tennessee and North Carolina. This is the same trail that Emma Gatewood first trailblazed when she was 67 years old, becoming the first woman to hike the trail solo. Well, her incredible story wasn't actually done. You see, when she came back from the Oregon Trail out west, she came home where at 69 years old, she once again hiked the entire Appalachian Trail. And then remarkably, at 75 years old, she did it again for the third time, becoming the first person on planet Earth to ever hike the Appalachian Trail 3 times. Truly incredible. Her story is one of perseverance, and it's definitely one that should never be forgotten. She is truly an American icon.
By the end of her life, Grandma Gatewood had hiked over 10,000 miles alone. And although she never sought fame, Emma was a celebrity and even appeared on NBC's Today Show, and countless newspaper articles were written about her. She became a vocal advocate for funding to improve America's hiking trail system. And many historians say that she single-handedly saved the Appalachian Trail from being altogether abandoned, and that it was her personal achievements alone that resulted in massive improvements. Emma Rowena Gatewood passed away on June 4th, 1973, at the age of 85 years old. She had continued hiking all the way until the very end, and today is a member of the Appalachian Trail Hall of Fame. What about you, my friend? If you had lived through everything Emma went through, could you have found the strength to hike the most rugged mountains in America 3 times at nearly 70 years old? Or could it be that the Appalachian Trail was the easy part compared to everything she had already survived? Definitely something to think about. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And thanks so much, as always, for watching this episode. Be sure to like and subscribe for more true stories from Appalachia's past.